as much as I love robots, I'm very skeptical of them.
Okay.
The first thing that I try to do when I come up with an idea for a robot is try not to build a robot. To try to think, is there some other way of doing that? Because if there is any other cheaper, simpler way of solving a problem rather than using a robot to do it, that way is going to win. So I don't want to waste my time. You said exactly the right thing here. I don't want to waste my time chasing a bunch of things that don't really have any chance. So I try to apply that filter of, can this really work? And I do come up with lots of ideas, almost all of them bad. And I try to get rid of the bad ideas as quickly as I can. And I know that no matter how shiny and wonderful the idea seems at first, it's probably bad. And first off, find out why it's bad. And if you can't prove that it's bad, then maybe you can go on with it.
Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, and I'm your host, Jason Seward, and today I've got a very exciting guest, Mr. Joe Jones. How are you, Mr. Jones?
I'm doing great, Jason.
That's good. You're coming to us from Boston. My family and I, we were fortunate enough to visit Boston last summer. Spent 3 or 4 days there. It's the first time I had been there. We were at a real estate conference, but I was able to bring the family, and we got a few days to enjoy the city. So, but Joe,
place, a lot of history.
Yeah, it for sure. And my youngest son, he's 9, is a history nut. Loves everything about it. So like he was in heaven. Anywhere we go that has history, he loves it. But for those that don't know Joe, Joe is the inventor, or I guess your main claim to fame is you're the inventor of Roomba, which is the robot, really probably the first, to my knowledge, like commercially available home robot that is, a vacuum cleaner. And we'll get into everything to do with that as we go forward. But Joe, before we kick it off, I'm going to turn it over to my son, JJ, for JJ's Joke of the Week. Take it away, buddy.
Why don't skeletons fight each other? They don't have the guts.
All right, JJ, appreciate it. That's my little comedian, Joe. As he would love your name because JJ, and so yeah, he'd be all about that. So, but Joe, so what we're going to do, I was fortunate enough to be connected to you through a mutual friend of ours, and all we've done up to this point is exchanged a few emails. I've done a little bit of research on your background, but what I like to do is just turn it over to you and let you give the folks who you are, kind of a history of yourself, and then I'll have a bunch of questions teed up from there.
Okay, great. So, like Jason said, I'm Joe Jones. I started off in the Missouri Ozarks. I grew up outside of Springfield, Missouri, and in a very tiny little rural community there. I went to Boston for college, and after I got to Boston, I sort of never went back. I went to study physics at MIT, but I couldn't find any niche in physics that I was passionate about. So after I graduated, I went to graduate school for a while, then I got out. I took a trip around the world trying to find my passion in physics. And I never found it, but when I got back to Boston, they were hiring at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. And this is way back in 1982. And when I got to the lab, I discovered robots. And I'd always been interested in technology. I'd always been a tinkerer my whole life, but I didn't really know how I was going to apply it in my career. But when I got to the AI lab, it was clear it was going to be robots because there was so much excitement at the time. There were so many brilliant people there. They were doing such interesting, fascinating work, and I just really wanted to be a part of it. So I stayed at the AI lab for 9 years, and 1 year while I was there, they were having this thing they call the AI Olympics, and each year they did this, and people got together and there were contests, sports and maybe other sorts of contests. But a thing that they did 1 year was the mobile robot group decided that they would hand out kits of parts and let everybody who was interested at the lab build whatever kind of robot they wanted to build. So I was fascinated by this, and I thought, what kind of robot can I build? And I lived alone at a little apartment at that time in Cambridge. And I thought, I'm a slob. I would like for my car to be clean, just I don't want to do it, right? So I thought, well, I'll build a little robot that cleans the floor of my apartment. So that was my project for this AI Olympics, or the robot talent show is actually the sub part of it, they call it. So I built over the course of about a month, I built a little robot, and at the end of the month, everybody who had built a robot went off to the faculty club, and the local public television station was there, and they filmed all the robots, and it was great fun. And my robot sort of worked. It had a little bottle brush on the front. It was mostly made out of Lego. It had a microprocessor on it, and it would zoom around the floor, and it would pick up the styrofoam that I had crumbled on the floor as a demonstration. And I thought, why aren't there any robot vacuum cleaners? It seems like it's not that hard. Um, so anyway, I didn't do anything with it after that. But I um, and a year or two after that, the lab ran out of money, and since I was research staff, I got laid off. And then I went to another company called Denning Mobile Robotics, and they made big robots. And I thought, big robots are not the way to go. There's this new paradigm that's been invented at the AI lab. I didn't invent it. It was a guy named Rod Brooks who invented it. But it means that you can build little robots that actually do something real, like a robot vacuum cleaner. So I proposed that idea to the folks at Denning Mobile Robotics that they build a little robot that cleans home floors. And I got permission. I and another guy got permission to work on this, sort of as a back burner project. But we worked on it for a few months, and we put together a little robot that would do this, and we demonstrated it to the whole company, and it did exactly what it's supposed to do. It ran around the floor, picked up the dirt, and I thought, well, anybody can see how the promise of this thing. This is going to be big. It'll change the Denning's whole business model. And then 10 days later, I and the other guy were both fired.
Oh,
The president, yep, the president thought we were just playing with toys, that big robots are the way to go, and little robots, it's just toys. So about that time, iRobot had been founded, and I applied for a job with them. They finally got they strung me along for a while, but they finally got a contract that would pay enough money that they could sort of pay my salary. So I started working at iRobot, and I was there for about I was there for a total of 10 years, but after the first 8 years, I think it was, the company grew very slowly in the beginning. There was only 3 people when I arrived at iRobot. Um, so the company grew very slowly, but about 8 years on, another guy and I proposed that maybe it's time for iRobot to try to build a little robot that cleans the floor. So we repeated the same thing. We were given dispensation to spend 2 weeks of our time totally working on this, and we had a budget of $10,000. And at the end of that time, we had another little robot floor cleaner to demonstrate. So again, we demonstrated it not to the whole company, but to upper management and a bunch of other people. And it worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. But this time, instead of getting fired, they decided that they would build a team and actually develop the robot into a product. So that's what we did for the next 3 years. We worked on that. We worked on that project, and in September 2002, Roomba was launched, and it became the first sort of affordable robot floor cleaner, the first affordable robot of any kind for the consumer market. And it pretty much took off from there. And by this time, iRobot has sold somewhere around 50 million
yeah.
Roombas. So that worked out really well.
That's so I'm gonna pause you there because I have a bunch of questions as you've walked through that. So let's let's go back to um so you mentioned you were always a tinkerer as a child. Okay. So my child, I was born in 81. So my like childhood growing up, the only thing that I could relate to robotics is like watching the Jetsons, right?
Yeah.
And but from my perspective, it was always like, oh, that'll never happen, that kind of thing. Did ideas like that at a young age for you, did you think of those, kind of flying cars and robots and stuff like that as actually being possible one day? Was your brain there or was it fantasy?
Oh, absolutely. I was totally there. Although I have to admit that when I was a kid, I really didn't think much about robots. I was a total space nut when I was a kid. And when I was 5 years old, I tried to build a satellite.
Okay.
The satellite did not work. It was the greatest disappointment of my young life, but the satellite didn't work. But I mean, I kept at it, and I kept trying to build different things. I tried to build a computer at one point, and that didn't work. I tried to build a transistor, and that didn't work either. But yeah, I was always totally focused on the future, and thought I had my plan was to go into outer space, to live and work in outer space.
Love it. Yeah. So did your parents, mom and dad, did they have that same uh, fascination with robotics and electronics and space, or did they not? And if they did not, how did they feed what you had?
They did not.
Okay.
My father was it was a small town, very small town that I grew up in, so people had to double up on the jobs. So my father was a school bus driver and a garage mechanic and the assistant mail carrier. And he liked cars. He worked on cars, but I didn't really get a lot of my interest in technology from him. And my mother was basically just a housewife. She really liked having a family. And the best thing that I can say, I think my parents did not discourage me. They
Yeah.
didn't really encourage me, but they didn't discourage me from my interest in science and technology.
Yeah. And the reason I ask that is because I have a 9-year-old son, as I've mentioned, and I also have an older daughter that's 14. She's more in line with her interests, are more in line with mine and my wife's. My son sounds like a 9-year-old version of you. Like he fascinated about space. He could tell you every detail of every planet, every star, every galaxy. He's got a telescope that I mean, he's all about it. And it's areas that we're interested in it because of his interest, but we don't know how to feed it, and it's more, we just encourage him to keep learning and keep applying what he's learning. And but I don't ever want to, just because I don't understand, like he's probably a better one to interview you with his knowledge of this stuff. But and I ask that just as a curious father, you know, looking back on it, were there things that maybe could have promoted or pushed or encouraged you even more had you had a different type of support?
Well, to a small degree, although it's kind of hard to say. In the little town where I lived, there was nobody who shared my interests, not even teachers at school who shared my interests. So I basically had to learn everything on my own, and that, in a way, that's a great skill to learn, because you're all of your life, if you go into inventing or science or such like, you will be sort of pushing the boundaries, and you have to learn stuff on your own. So it would have I would have appreciated having a compatriot who
Hmm.
shared my interests and we could have learned together, but not having that wasn't it was a blessing in a way.
Okay. Yep. Got it. So, I kind of selfishly want to ask these questions because we're still trying to figure out how can we best get him situated to lean into these fascinations he has and things like that. It's a different time now. He's got YouTube at his fingertips where
Yeah,
everything he's fascinated. There's 10 great channels that are teaching on these things
yeah.
and just feeding that. So, but I also, it's like he's teaching me stuff every day, and the best thing I can do is just genuinely show my interest in it at this point and give him what he needs to excel with it. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now I want to go back. You mentioned being, when you were in Boston, you were working with MIT in the AI department. When you had that, like at that point in your career, you were, fairly young. You were in your 20s, I would imagine then.
Yeah, 20s
With
and early
that phase.
30s.
You were working a job that was paying you a salary. Did you ever see these things that you were working on from an entrepreneur lens at that point in your life? Like, these are products that could be made commercial, that I could build a business or an idea around.
So I wish that I had, but in that at that time of my life, I was not thinking about business at all. I had grown up wanting to be an experimental physicist, and so I was just totally focused on, mostly focused on science. And then when I went to the AI lab and discovered this really cool technology, I sort of refocused on robots, and I wanted them to be used. I thought robots could do really useful things, but putting it together into a business, that was something that I wasn't focused on.
Right. Got it. And then I guess that evolved. It had to evolve a little bit as you on board with iRobot, and it sounds like. What did you do your first 8 years with iRobot? Because you mentioned you didn't start working on the vacuum cleaner until 8 years after. So what were you doing with them early on?
So in the early years of iRobot, the company was basically doing anything that they could possibly do to pay the bills.
Mhm.
And mostly what that meant was getting contracts either from a government agency or from private companies who wanted to build a robot of some kind. So iRobot built a huge number of different kinds of robots. They investigated things like they tried to build this small hazardous material robot that they could send into some place where it was contaminated and figure out what the contamination was. They built a robot that was designed, it was like 2 inches in diameter and 30 feet long, that was designed to go down into an oil well and it was supposed to make repairs, although I never quite understand how it was supposed to repair the oil well, but they did that. They made a robot that went into one of the pyramids in Egypt, trying to explore this mysterious channel, small one, and see what was up there. They built a robot baby doll that was supposed to react to the way that the child was playing with it, and that's just a few of them. So they did
Yeah.
all kinds of things, and I worked on a few of those.
Gotcha. And then started, when they gave you the reins to start the Roomba, or start developing that, sounds like you had a team under you. At that point, you're developing. It sounds like you're developing something that you're passionate about, obviously, right? It's something you've been working on since the 80s. But now you have an opportunity to really develop it from a commercial standpoint, and it's going to be going in people's homes. So at that point, were you having to look through the lens of, I guess, balancing technology with how much this thing is going to cost to mass produce? Were you, on that side of things as well?
Well, the story's a little more complicated than that.
Okay.
First off, the thing that we had noticed, so this guy that I proposed it with, a guy named Paul Sandon, he was a mechanical engineer, and we had been talking for a couple of years by that point about why robots weren't succeeding and why every attempt that we knew about had failed, and for floor cleaning robots. And it turned out there were a whole bunch of them. And I recently wrote a book about my experiences developing Roomba. And one of the most fascinating things that I've discovered um, working on the book was how many times people had tried to build robots and failed. The first serious attempt was actually 1957. And a guy from Whirlpool Corporation had tried to build a robot, and it sort of worked, except it wasn't practical. And then over the years, other people tried. Minolta tried, Panasonic tried. They spent like 12 years and must have been tens of millions of dollars trying to develop, and they all failed. So we were discussing, why have all these people failed? And the thing that we came up with was basically it was not because of technology. It wasn't that the technology wasn't sufficient to build a robot. It was because people were sort of looking in the wrong direction. They were thinking that they were inventing the future rather than building product. And the most important thing was the price. So people knew how much a manual vacuum cleaner cost, and we figured nobody was going to pay 10 times that much just because the product is a robot, right? People don't care. They want their floors clean. They don't care what does it. So it was an economic idea that was the foundation of Roomba. So when we started our team, we were totally focused on it can't cost, well, our first target was $100. And it turned out that was a little too much, too little. We ultimately got to $200, and it was because there was a range. People would pay maybe $50 to $150 for a typical vacuum in those days, and we figured the robot might cost a little bit more, but not a lot more than that. So everything that we did was to keep the price at that $200 point. However, I wasn't the person in charge of the Roomba team. If you read the book, you'll find that there was this guy, Winston Tao, who was really a brilliant manager. And his brilliance was that he knew how to manage creative people. And lots of people seem not to know how to manage creative people. You have to respect their independence. You have to respect the process of their creativity. And Winston got that, and it was because that he was leading the team that I think that we were able to get to the finish line with a product that had the right technology and yet was aligned with the needs of the business. Um, that was a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I could see where that would be the ultimate challenge is like folks that maybe have the wiring like yourself, that you want to build something that is the best it can possibly be, may not always be thinking of the economics of it, right, for a business.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had a great leader in the sense that was able to combine those two worlds, and that obviously led to the success of the product. I When you develop this, or you got, iRobot developed it, now you're going to bring it to market. Was there anything proprietary, or I guess, did y'all have any patents? Because now in the market, there's several manufacturers of these types of products.
Yep.
Was there anything unique to the Roomba that you guys had full control or ownership of that others were not able to implement?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was
Mhm.
a number of things.
Okay.
The, the, maybe it's a subtle point, but some of there was a lot of stuff in the robot that we would not have had to invent if we could have raised the price, right? It was the fact that we wanted the price to be really low that required us to find new, cheaper solutions for things that could have been done otherwise. One of them was, Roomba drives up to a stairway and it doesn't drive over. And the reason that it doesn't drive over is because it has these little cliff sensors that we invented that let it not do that. Now, we could have bought one. We could have bought cliff sensors, but the ones that were available, like, a couple of dollars a piece, and we couldn't spend any more than like 10 cents. So we had to invent a cheaper way of doing that. And that's just one of the things. There's three or four other technologies that we had to invent to make it cheap enough that people would buy it.
Yep. I'm going to share a story with you about our first Roomba, and I'm sure you've heard similar stories like this, but I'll share my experience. And we've had several since then, but the very first one we got, my wife's all excited about it. We have young kids, and we have a chocolate lab at home, and we got it. We've set it all up. We watched it run one time. We said, okay, we got to be careful because we've heard the horror stories where a dog, a pet, might use the bathroom on the floor, and the Roomba does its thing. So we were very careful about, we're only going to run it when we're there or when the dog is put up or something like that. Well, week one of owning this new Roomba, that I was in a hurry one morning to get out the door. My wife and kids had already left, and I apologize. I was planning to be there, and I started running the Roomba, but something came up, and I had to run out.
Yeah.
So I left the house with the Roomba had just started, and I had left I don't remember what food, but there was food like on the, because I was in a rush, and I just left it on the table, and a chocolate lab. I come home a few hours later and open my garage door into the house, immediately hit with the smell that anybody that has dogs is familiar with. And I see the remnants of this food that I left on the table everywhere. The Roomba, the dog ate the food, had an accident, and the Roomba spent the next hour spreading that accident every corner of our hardwood floors. So you can imagine my first experience with your product was not a very pleasant one. So,
Yeah, sorry about that.
but yeah, so I had to share that story with you because and we've loved them ever since. And my kids, I think we've had 3 or 4 since then, but my kids name them all and they've become almost pets of ours. So yeah, very interesting. So I'm curious. Now y'all brought this product to market in 2002, and I think you told me offline you went on. You no longer are employed by iRobot, and you've started your own journey. Beyond that. But in 2002, this it was the first time, certainly me, but others many had heard of this idea of um, a robot, in the house, right?
Yeah.
This is, again, stuff you see on the Jetsons and whatnot. Um, since then, we're 23 years later. AI is all you hear about. Robots is all, I mean, it's just happened in a blink of an eye. So, and I do want to get into your book in a minute. I kind of want to wrap up talking about that, but I'd like to know what your journey has been since when did you leave iRobot?
So I left in 2006.
Okay, so that's almost 20 years ago.
Yep.
What has been Joe's story since that time?
Well, of course, ever since I was employed at the AI lab, I have been hopelessly addicted to robots.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do after Roomba was more robots. And I was surprised that iRobot wasn't really interested in building any more revolutionary products. Because it's a risk. It's a huge risk. When you're a startup, you don't have much to lose. But then after you've got a success, you don't want to do that again. So it turned out that the only way that I could work on the next cutting edge robot was to leave. So I convinced several people at the company to leave with me, and we left on very good terms. We worked with management on the way out the door. What we did next was a little robot that moves potted plants on nursery farms and in greenhouses. And you wouldn't think, I had never heard of such an application, and you wouldn't think that that would be any call for it. But it turns out that there's 1 to 2 billion potted plants grown and sold in the U.S. each year. And there is a step in the production of each of those plants where first they're grown right together because you want to minimize the amount of land that you have to use to grow the plants, and you want to water everything efficiently. So first they're grown together, but then the plants start to grow and they need to move apart, otherwise they'll grow into each other and damage each other. So there's a step called spacing where this army of people have to go out into the fields and move the plants apart. And we thought, seems like a perfect job for a robot. So we spent about, let's see, 8 years or so, another 8 years or so, developing that robot. And that robot launched. The company's called Harvest Automation. And now there are robots across the country that are spending their days moving potted plants on
Wow.
nursery farms. So then after that, I got interested in agriculture. So I started another company, and it was called Turtle Corporation. And we built a little robot for consumers this time rather than businesses. And it was called Turtle. And it's a little solar powered robot. It lives in the garden. And it prevents weeds from growing. It just spends all of its time wandering around the garden, and if it finds a weed, it chops it down. But it turned out that just the fact that the robot was constantly running around it had these serrated wheels that tended to kill any weeds that sprouted, so it didn't even have to chop them down.
That's fascinating. I personally own 30 acres, and we have a big garden, and weeds are my number one, nemesis. So
Yeah.
I was not familiar with that product though. And you talk about, and I'll check that out, but you talk about agriculture. My former career, I sold crop insurance here in the Southeast. And so I worked with a lot of I was very immersed in agriculture. And John Deere, which is a big manufacturer of equipment and other things, but they put on a demo. This must have been 8 years ago, 6 or 8 years ago, and I was invited out to it. And they were demonstrating robotic harvesters, like tractors and big equipment, and I just remember, like my brain, I don't understand all of it, but I remember being just so fascinated that this $1 million piece of equipment was going through harvesting corn, I believe is what and there was nobody manning it. There was nobody in it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And there was nobody controlling it. It was
Yeah.
all programmed based off of, whatever. And so to hear you talk about this applied to agriculture, that really piques my interest. So very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. John Deere is clearly heavily into that.
Yep. So how about, have you dabbled in any, and the reason I ask this, because I've just recently listened to a podcast talking about AI drones and drone technology. Have you dabbled in any of that space with drones or um, anything like that?
So no, I haven't. However, one of the co-founders of iRobot, a woman named Helen Grainer, did start a company called, what was it called? Sci-Fi Works. And right. And she had a drone, and the claim to fame for that drone was that it was actually powered not by batteries, but by a little, a very, very tiny power cord, so it could just hover indefinitely. Um,
Okay. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and I just, like I said, just a few days ago, I heard this podcast and they were just all technology. And again, I'm fascinated by this period from, the last 20 years, because this has been your whole life long before most human beings are thinking anything like this is possible. But over really the last 5 years, everything's come to the forefront, and it's culturally understood that AI and robots are here. They're here to stay, and it's the way of the future. And you've lived a life and a career that has been building to this. So now that it's more, I guess, on everybody's radar, the everyday consumer or the everyday human that's not immersed in it like yourself, how does that make you feel? Is it because your playground used to be an area that nobody cared about, nobody knew about,
yep.
and never thought anything would come of it. Now your playground is the hottest topic on the planet.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess I have kind of mixed feelings about it. Everyone seems really fascinated by humanoid robots right now, and you can go on the web and you can find all kinds of videos of robots, cooking breakfast and folding laundry, and a few of them where they're falling on their faces. And I think it, and also an enormous amount of investment is going into them. Literally tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars are going into these things. And I guess I'm a curmudgeon and a contrarian, but I don't think they're quite ready yet. I don't think
Okay.
that you're going to see a humanoid robot is not going to take over your job in the next several years. At least that's my take on it, because it's as a robot developer, I know that it is pretty easy to make a demo that looks really cool.
Hmm.
But building a product that has to sit out there in the world and earn its keep every day, that is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And I don't think that humanoid robots are really close to that yet.
Gotcha. Understood. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, so as you kind of walk through your timeline, I keep hearing these aren't, every step, there was never, I spent 3 months doing this or 6 months doing this. These are years of blocks of time that you're developing stuff. And where I'm
Yeah.
going with this is you, you have to have a very high level of resilience, persistence, passion about what you're doing to stick to something for that amount of time, not knowing if there's going to be a payoff at the end. So can you talk about your mindset for all these years of doing that? I mean, your last company, you said, or the one with the potted plants, y'all worked on it for 8 years before you had something to bring to market. That's a lot of time without
Yep.
much revenue or anything coming in. So what kept you getting up, driving every day? Probably faced a lot of hurdles, I would imagine, a lot of
Yep.
disappointment, a lot of failure. What got you through that from a mindset standpoint?
Well, you've mentioned it already, and it's passion. So when you actually have a passion for something like this, you don't have much choice, right? And it's not grueling, it's not difficult. If you have a setback, you think, well, okay, then I can work my way around this one, and you have another setback, I can work my way around that one too, because it's it's the journey really more than the destination. It's wonderful that Roomba did so incredibly well. Um, and it was one of the most fun robots that I worked on, but all of them were fun. Most of them didn't have such a huge payoff at the end, but I wasn't doing it for the huge payoff at the end. I was doing it because it has the potential to change the world in a positive way. And it's fun working on that every day.
I love that answer. And you just said something that makes me think you've, I, I, I don't know. We just met last week, so you likely have not had time to hear previous episodes I've done. But one question I ask just about every guest has to do with journey versus destination. And you just said that, it's a journey and not a destination. So I, I'm going to phrase the question a little bit or set it up a little bit differently with you since you just brought it up. You every step of this again it's developed into where you've become more of an entrepreneur with some newer products later in your career, but early on you're taking jobs, right? You're working for companies to earn an income, but you mentioned you were always doing something you were passionate about. So throughout this journey, how often or if ever did retirement ever come into your mind? Like I'm working to build up this whatever legacy nest egg so I can go sit on a beach somewhere, or where you just have always been so focused on your passion that your journey is the destination and there is no retirement? Yeah.
Well, let me tell you a little story about that.
Okay.
When I was probably a sophomore in college, I was working in the lab of this physics professor, and there was also in the lab this guy who was a machinist, and who's really good at what he did, and everybody liked him. And then one day he announced that, well, he was retirement age and he was going to retire, and I was just amazed. I was flabbergasted. I could not imagine that, and I thought to myself, so he's going to go home and wait to die? What? That made no sense to me. And perhaps I've melded a little bit in the years since, but I think probably one of the reasons that I had reacted so strongly to this machinist's retirement was that I grew up in a rural farming community, and I don't think I had ever previously seen someone voluntarily retire. Right. My Aunt Bessie was a first grade teacher, and there was a mandatory retirement age when she hit like 70. She had to retire, and she left the state to go to another state and teach for a couple of years because she wanted to do that. The farmers that I know, none of them retired. Right. They may worked a little bit less as they got older, but nobody retired. And I couldn't, and I still can't imagine not doing fun work just because you get old. So no, I never thought about retirement.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm obviously, I have, hopefully, if everything goes well, I have a lot of life left to live. And I used to, when I was in my corporate career for so many years, I was obsessed with retirement. I didn't know how to define retirement, but I was obsessed with not having to do the thing that I was earning an income to do. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I was able through some businesses and stuff. And now I'm an entrepreneur and I'm doing something I love every day. So I've completely shifted that mindset. I can't imagine not doing what I'm
Yeah.
doing. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna all
Sure.
so now for me, and it sounds like you've always been this way, but like just find something you're so passionate about, you don't want it to end. Like if it
Yeah.
ends, that's like
Exactly.
death. And so
Right.
I love that mindset. I want to segue now into your book. You mentioned it earlier. I will say I was telling you offline, again, we just connected last week, and I told you that I was gonna, before we recorded, try to read your book. Well, there's no Audible version, so I had to order it, and it just came in the mail yesterday. So I honestly have not read the book yet, and I fully intend to. But the name of the book is Dancing with Roomba, and I'd love for you to talk about what inspired it and anything around that.
Sure. So the title is inspired basically by the name of Roomba. When the folks who named it came up with a name, it seemed to them that the way that the robot kind of bounced around and twisted and turned, it was like a dance. It was like it was dancing around the room. So they actually combined the name of a dance, rumba, with room to get Roomba. So that's why I wanted to call the book Dancing with Roomba. And I've always thought it was a great story. It when when you're involved in it, it just this is the thing that you do every day, and you're hoping it's going to work. You don't know if it's going to work, but then you look back on it, and it's a great story. I think because first off, because so many people tried and failed to do it, and then finally this little company put together a team of people who were basically misfits, very creative people, but misfits. And we spent 3 years, and we managed to do what corporations, huge corporations, didn't do. And it's also the case that there were so many ways that this project could have died. So many ways that things could have gone wrong. And I touch on some of those things in the book. And one of my favorite stories from the book is there was another robot that was built at the same time that Roomba came out, and it was built by Electrolux Corporation, and they're one of the largest manufacturers of vacuum cleaners in the world. At one time, I'm not sure it's true now, but at one time, every fifth vacuum cleaner was built by Electrolux. So um, they got the mandate to build the world's first robot vacuum cleaner, and this was in like 1991 or something that they got that, and they worked on it for a total of about 10 years, and they finally got it to market, but it cost $1,500. Uh, and people, you don't have to pay $1,500 to buy a vacuum cleaner. So that was a shock to us while we were developing Roomba, that this other huge company came out with the same product that we were building. But when we found out how much it cost, we thought, well, maybe we still have a chance.
Hmm. Yeah. Had you written a book before, or is this your first book?
No, I had written three other books before this one, and
Okay.
they are all more technical books about robots. One of them is how to design and build your own robot. In fact, that book came out of the robot talent show for the AI Olympics, because people had so much fun trying to build their own robots and then showing them off. I thought, lots of people would like to do this if they knew how.
Right.
So my colleague and I wrote one of the first books about how to design and build your own robot. And then I also wrote a book about robot programming, but this is my first book for a more general audience.
Gotcha. So the book, and again, I'm excited to dive into it because I have just what little bit I dove in last night. I can tell this is more about robots, more than just about robots. I feel like it's going to cover a lot of mindset stuff, a lot of the adversity that you push through, through the process and things like that. So I think it's for a lot of folks listening that maybe you don't, like myself, you don't understand or have a passion about robots. I think there's a lot more lessons in this book from what I can tell so far. And yeah,
Yeah, there are no equations and no diagrams in the book.
yeah,
It's mostly stories. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that you know people, we use products all the day. We have all day long. We have different kinds of products, and we don't really know where they came from. And yet each one of them has a story behind it. And some of the stories are really fascinating and filled with pathos and intrigue. And
yeah.
I
I
want
mean,
people that understand that.
yeah. I mean that I have, until a week ago, I've always just thought of our Roomba as just a product in our house that
Yeah.
one time made me very frustrated.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, clearly, like just to, and I appreciate you being willing to come on and share, in this little amount of time, the story and the history behind it, because it's fascinating. You're right. There is a really good story there. There's a story of somebody and folks that were involved with you chasing something they're passionate about, not because they want to get rich, not because they wanted to, get fame and fortune and all these things, just because you were passionate about something and you chased it and you sought it out. And over time, like we've mentioned a couple, like just to hear, when you talked about what was the name again of the company that the potted plants? What was the name of that
That
company
was
again?
harvest automation.
Okay. You took 8 hours to be able to, or 8 years to be at a point where you could bring this to market to solve one niche problem.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And like you don't do that without being passionate about it, because I'm sure there was a lot of lost sleep and a lot of things,
Oh yeah.
adversity that went
Yep.
into that. And then I would imagine you reap probably some financial gain there, but just hearing you talk, I know that means very little compared to the benefit of seeing your product in action and seeing it help these businesses solve bottlenecks that they might have had, or things like that. And that excites me. It I'm just fascinated by it. So I kind of want to wrap up now with what does, I mean, you've just laid out in a short period of time a very productive career, right? Everything you've been involved with, you've spent a lot of time, passion, energy, resources, made a lot of sacrifices, I'm sure, to do all these things. I know you don't believe in retirement. So what does the next, like, what does this next chapter or the next few chapters look like for Joe Jones?
Well, I am looking for more robots to work on. I have a few ideas. I would like to build a so when I'll give you one example, and I don't know that this is going to work out at all, but here's an example. When Roomba started to become successful, people would come to iRobot and they would say, "Well, you built a robot that cleans the floor. How about a robot that cleans the bathtub or cleans the windows?" And we would all gently explain to them, "Well, the technology that you use to clean the floor is completely different from the technology you would need to clean it, like a vertical surface or something." But I always felt bad about that. I always felt really bad about not being able to provide such a product because it's exactly the kind of thing that you want robots to do. You want them to do the crummy jobs that you don't want to do, but you want it done. You just don't want to do it yourself. So I always felt bad about that. Well, recently I've had an idea about how one could build a device that would keep the tub and the toilet and the windows clean. I don't know that it'll work out. I haven't done enough experiments yet, but that's the kind of thing that I would be focused on going forward.
Okay, so this leads to another question then. You talk about experimenting with new ideas. So I would imagine your brain is just churning ideas daily, nonstop, right? So how do you, I'm trying to think of how I want to articulate this. How do you avoid the trap of chasing every shiny object or every good idea you think is good? How do you avoid spreading yourself too thin where you're trying to focus on chasing these 30 ideas that you've got rather than locking in and perfecting one? Or what dance do you do to balance that?
Well, as much as I love robots, I'm very skeptical of them.
Okay.
The first thing that I try to do when I come up with an idea for a robot is try not to build a robot, to try to think, is there some other way of doing that? Because if there is any other cheaper, simpler way of solving a problem rather than using a robot to do it, that way is going to win. So
Right.
I don't want to waste my time. You said exactly the right thing here. I don't want to waste my time chasing a bunch of things that don't really have any chance. So I try to apply that filter of, can this really work? And I do come up with lots of ideas, almost all of them bad. And I try to get rid of the bad ideas as quickly as I can. And I know that no matter how shiny and wonderful the idea seems at first, it's probably bad. And first off, find out why it's bad. And if you can't prove that it's bad, then maybe you can go on with it.
And then the next step is, I mean, obviously you're writing out, you're visualizing, you're probably sketching a lot of stuff out, making your notes and your equations, but do you have a lab that you eventually take that to? Like, I mean, I'm just curious as the process as you develop these ideas.
So I don't generally need much of a lab. My favorite construction materials are cardboard and packing tape, and
Okay.
I've and Lego. Cardboard, packing tape, and Lego. Those are the wonderful things, and most ideas can be tested out using that. And these days, it's gotten even easier because now you got 3D printing, and 3D printing is just such this wonderful thing. You have an idea for this weird thing, then you can just build it, right? You can just test it out immediately. So I haven't. If I had a lab available, I would probably be using it every day. But just here in my little office, I have most of what I need.
Joe, so I keep bringing him up because my 9-year-old son this is our upstairs. We have a room above our garage that is his lab. It is
Cool.
filled with cardboard, packing tape, Legos. He's got these magnetic blocks, and he is in there constantly. Like, he'll see something on a YouTube video or see something driving down the road. He'll get in his brain, oh, I've got to go replicate this. So he tries to build it out, and it's a lot of it's silly, but he's doing that. And you mentioned 3D printer. I got to make sure he doesn't hear this before Christmas, but that one of his Christmas gifts. His big Christmas gift is a really nice 3D printer. So
Great.
we're excited to
That's perfect.
give him that. But yeah, and that's part of the reason I I wanted to hear your story, obviously, but I was so excited to get you on here because it's I feel like it's a story. It's a version of my son that he hasn't developed into yet, and just to, you know, it excites me because you mentioned it earlier. We're from a very small rural area. He's got a lot of friends, but none of his friends have these interests, right?
Yeah.
And he does it a lot in a vacuum, no pun intended, but like, you know, in his own world above, in that room above our garage, none of his friends, they couldn't care less about these things. So he goes and interacts with them in all the normal ways. And then he would rather be upstairs doing this stuff. And I just, you know,
Yeah.
I explain to him all the time, buddy, as you mature and develop, this is going to stick to what you're passionate about. It'll develop into something. So it's very good for me to see a proven version of that and to get to have a conversation with you. So
Cool. Well, best of luck to your son.
yeah.
You should have a fun journey ahead.
This has been a great conversation for me. I think a lot of our listeners will enjoy it. Where can folks find out more about you? Where can they find your book and things like that?
Dancingwithroomba.com is my website, and you'll be able to find the book there. It's also available on Amazon and all the online sources you usually get books from.
Gotcha. And we'll drop the link to all of that. And I think you said you're active on LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll drop all those links in there. And Joe, I can't thank you enough. This has been a great conversation. I know you're a busy man, and we didn't know each other over a week ago. And for you to take an hour out of your day to spend time with me, I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been great fun. I really appreciate you asking me on.
Yep. And we'll hopefully I'm gonna follow your journey and see what you have coming to the masses with future robots. But again, I appreciate your time, and I hope this was beneficial to you as well. I hope you.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
Yep.
It's fun.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up another episode of Burning the Ships, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Burning the Ships podcast. As always, want to thank our sponsor, 608B Capital. We are a short-term lending fund, a debt fund, open for investors who are looking for a passive return. And also we offer products our main product, to fix and flippers and buy and holders, folks that are doing things like that in real estate. Also want to remind you about our referral program. Check out our website for more information on that, and we're happy to talk to you further if you're interested. Again, thank you for joining us on Burning the Ships, and do me a favor and go out and try to find someone or some way that you can add value into the world today. Think through it, zoom out, and try to find where you can add value. I think it'll help wrap up your day, wrap up your week, whatever you're working on a positive note if you constantly think that way. Where can I add value? So with that, we thank you for joining us on another episode of Burning the Ships. Have a good one.